RPA is officially dead. After years of life support, UiPath and Automation Anywhere finally pulled the plug on the term robotic process automation, a term that was once proudly emblazoned all over their websites, so much so that it littered the homepage in 20 different places. Fast forward to today, and its entire presence has been reduced to a lone epitaph in the page footer. It's almost like it never even existed at all. It was a quiet end to a tumultuous life, one that peaked with such grand promises of a bot for every person. But this news didn't really come as a surprise to anyone. Industry insiders already knew it was just a mercy killing, one that came too little too late. You see, the father of RPA, Phil First, had already bludgeoned his own darling into a coma in 2019 and again in 2020 for good measure, lamenting that it had become a vicious web of bullshit that bore no reflection to the term he originally dreamt up. In many ways, RPA's belated death comes as a relief, a satisfying conclusion that gives all of us the permission to move on. Yet some burning questions still remain. Was RPA doomed to fail from birth as the result of corporate exploitation and foul play? Did it suffer from growing pains and overwhelming pressure that plagued many a child actor? Or did it simply die of natural causes after being abandoned for the greener pastures of AI? In this postmortem, we'll investigate all of these questions and more. Join me as we take a walk down memory lane of RPA's tragic life, from its hopeful beginnings through to its agonizing downfall. 2012 was a big year for tech. Facebook's IPO fizzled out, Instagram took off, and Nintendo launched the Wii U. But perhaps the biggest story of 2012 went under the radar. A research report was published to little fanfare, modestly titled "Robotic Automation Emerges as a Threat to Traditional Low-Cost Outsourcing." The author was Phil First of HFS, who was working with automation software vendor Blue Prism to analyze the industry. This was the birth of RPA as we know it, in the form of cheaply built software robots that Phil envisioned could one day compete against BPOs and offshore outsourcing. Of course, RPA was just an arbitrary buzzword. Software robots have been around for decades, ever since the invention of modern computing. Google's search engine has long been powered by web-scraping bots. MMO bot farms have grinded the equivalent of a small country's GDP in virtual gold. And crypto mining bots account for 1% of the world's total energy usage. But the problem with buzzwords is that anybody could come along and twist their definition. I've already revealed how opportunistic founders have cobbled together RPA platforms from free open source libraries and pitched themselves as the next big tech unicorns. Video link down below. And their promises were truly compelling. It was a dream of end-to-end automation of even the most complex business processes, adding up to billions of hours of FTE cost savings. A silver bullet that could solve any challenge. The future of work itself. But this ridiculous hype was soon tempered as reality sank in, because RPA platforms were really just a collection of screen scraping, UI automation, and task scheduling functions. It was only useful as a band-aid for legacy or inefficient business processes, rather than being a transformative technology. Failure to scale was the first crack in the foundations of the RPA delusion. By 2018, the writing was already on the wall, as most companies couldn't even get past the pilot phase. By 2019, 30 to 50% of initial RPA projects were failing, with UiPath's platinum implementation partner, EY, injecting themselves into the market as project saviors. Ha! So RPA now needed expensive consultancies to get up and running? Whatever happened to being a quick and cheap workaround to bypass corporate IT? Layoffs inevitably followed, with UiPath and Automation Anywhere cutting deep into their ranks. In 2019, UiPath fired 400 employees, or 11% of its workforce, citing the need to right-size the company. They've since fired another 6% in 2023 to increase execution velocity, operational efficiency, and customer centricity. Whatever that means. In 2020, Automation Anywhere also laid off 260 employees, or 10% of its workforce. By now, Phil First had seen enough, announcing the death of RPA due to its inability to scale beyond anything but piecemeal tasks. He advocated for the shift towards integrated platforms featuring AI and analytics and future-proofing for cloud and APIs. But would RPA vendors listen to their industry visionary and actually put in the R&D effort to rebuild their platforms? To find out, let's look at UiPath, who were forced to disclose their annual reports since going public in 2021. In that first year, they spent a measly 17% of their expenses on research and development, compared to 58% on sales and marketing. This 58% includes the generously paid sales staff who form the majority of their 4,000 employees, commissions to their resellers or business partners, and who could forget their $8 million Las Vegas extravaganzas. You see, I don't even think UiPath is a tech company. It is and always has been a marketing machine, and that's why they adopted an even more genius strategy, rebranding RPA's failure to scale into a wonderfully optimistic narrative. Since customers couldn't scale unattended bots with any meaningful success, why not double down on attended bots that could serve as robotic butlers for piecemeal individual tasks? Thus the slogan, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. A bot for every person was born in 2020. At this point in its short life, RPA had already been mangled beyond recognition. What started as unattended bots that could automate specific BPO and offshoring processes became a marketing gimmick for companies to buy tons of attended licenses for their users. Users who were promised that they didn't need to know a single line of code, yet ironically had to train for hundreds of hours on proprietary RPA tools. Yep, they had tapped into the new buzzword at the time, citizen development. And with citizen development came citizen IT analysts, industry analysts with no technical background and even less integrity, who were happy to take massive vendor payments and consulting fees to write glowing and biased reports. Reports full of wild predictions and fantasies based on zero real-world evidence, where RPA had not even been proven at scale. And of course, the hyper-inflated expectations they created fell way short, setting companies up to fail and costing millions of dollars in wasted effort and opportunities. And despite the mafia-like IT analyst industry always protecting their own, even Phil saw the need to call out an egregious conflict of interest: the release of a spin-doctored Forrester piece timed right after news of massive layoffs at UiPath. And guess what? The report was written by Forrester's vice president and principal analyst Craig LeClaire, who just so happens to be the father of Justin LeClaire, the director of engineering at UiPath. Nothing to see here, guys. And as if this level of overhyping wasn't enough, UiPath's disastrous IPO in 2021 is currently the subject of a securities fraud lawsuit accusing them of false valuation, misleading disclosures, and insider selling, which I've covered in a video linked down below. But in the real world, the stark reality was already laid bare for all to see. In 2021, Automation Anywhere admitted that 49% of their enterprises had less than 10 bots in production, and only 8% had more than 100 bots in production. The RPA industry's revenue growth slowed to a crawl, back down to the average software market growth rate of 16% and barely reaching $3 billion in 2023. So much for a total addressable market of over $60 billion. UiPath's valuation crashed from $40 billion to $10 billion. It was a sign, perhaps, that RPA's golden age was at its twilight. But as RPA star dimmed, a new child star was born: generative AI. This new kid on the block was more adaptable and powerful and ready to take on the world that RPA could not. It was able to work with unpredictable processes and unstructured data using deep learning models trained on trillions of parameters. In the blink of an eye, AI models took over entire industries, including chatbots, document understanding, fraud detection, medical diagnosis, and business analytics. In the last 3 years, generative AI has come from nothing to 5 times the entire market revenue of all RPA software. But if RPA is dead, why are vendors like UiPath and Automation Anywhere still alive and kicking? You see, they're just 2 of the many chameleons that have survived over the years in the enterprise software jungle, forever changing their marketing colors to match the latest buzzword. From RPA to citizen development, and now onto intelligent automation platforms and generative AI. As we close the scrapbook on RPA, we must ask ourselves, how do we prevent greed and hype from destroying the potential of this next generation of technologies as well? RPA's downfall may be mostly self-inflicted, but the relentless progress of technology has claimed many more victims. Remember Abby, the former titan of OCR? Their website is now a jumble of buzzwords from AI power to process mining to intelligent automation. In other words, completely indistinguishable from UiPath or Automation Anywhere. But is this evolution, or simply their final desperate attempts to avoid extinction? Check out this video where I'll expose the flimsy foundations beneath their new sheen of AI paint. The gloves are coming off! And it's going to be a bloodbath. I'll see you there!